Trump is an original man. How the USA will respond to the Syrian campaign of Turkey. Experts, we don't see a clear desire to punish Ankara. Turkish troops launched the military operation, Source of Peace, in Syria against Kurdish forces. Earlier, Ankara actually received a green light from Washington. But can it be said that the whole story with the attack of the Turkish army on the position of the Kurds was provoked by Donald Trump? On the one hand, it was the American president who led the troops out of Kurdish-controlled territories, thereby opening up opportunities for Erdogan to deal with opponents at his southern borders. On the other hand, the US president from the very first day called for refusing to participate in other people's wars, and it is unlikely that the decision to withdraw from Syria can be called truly unexpected. At the same time, it was the United States that at one time guaranteed the Kurds security, and these promises became the reason why the Peshmerga forces tore down the fortifications on the border with Turkey. Trump's decision to withdraw American soldiers from Syria was met with much criticism, both in the Middle East and in the United States itself. In Syria, the Kurds openly consider themselves loyal. They recall that their soldiers fought with the Americans against ISIS, a banned terrorist organization in Russia, side by side, and it was the Peshmerga forces that suffered the main damage in the fight against Islamists. In the battles with terrorists, more than 10,000 Kurds died, and it was the Kurdish troops who stormed Rakka, the capital of the caliphate. Donald Trump took an ideological, albeit somewhat controversial, position. On the one hand, he is not going to protect the Kurds and emphasizes that, from the US to Syria thousands of kilometers. Trump is sure that the Kurds, rather, on the contrary, received unexpected help from America in the battle for their land, and did not enter into a comprehensive military alliance with the United States. The head of the White House admits that the Peshmerga fighters did indeed fight with the Americans against a single enemy, but for this the United States supplied them a very large amount of money and weapons, so this was a mutually beneficial cooperation that did not impose on the US Army obligations to protect the Kurdish Rojava. The Kurds didn't help us in World War I, Trump said, bearing in mind that this alliance is very local and temporary, and if someone attacked the states, the Kurds would stay away. On the other hand, Trump does not want to look like a man who has surrendered his ally to Turkey. The US president has long been criticized for his weak foreign policy stance on such authoritarian leaders as Erdogan and Kim Jong-un. Against this background, the US president threatens to destroy the Turkish economy, in case the Turks do something unacceptable to America. But not only Trump is ready to influence Ankara, several senators, both Republicans and Democrats, led by a prominent hawk Lindsey Graham, announced a draft sanctions against Turkey. The measures prescribed in the law impose restrictions on both the personal assets of Erdogan and his closest supporters, and on entire sectors of the Turkish economy, such as energy and defense. In light of the unfolding events, MK asked experts to comment on the situation. What explains the fact that Trump, referring to the current situation, refers to the events of 75 years ago? Dmitry Chinkov, deputy director of the Institute for Strategic Studies and Forecasts, President Trump is a very original and extravagant person. Most likely, he really came across some article from which he quoted these lines. It is probably pointless to deny, the Kurdish state, which did not exist, did not really help the United States defeat Hitler. I have great doubts about the claim that the Kurds did not fight anyway on the side of the anti-Hitler coalition. Now such a link to current events seems rather strange. Nothing more stupid to justify the current behavior of the American political elite on the issue of the North Syrian operation of the Turkish troops is impossible. You could have come up with something better, and this is a clear failure of one of Trump's advisors. Alexei Mukin, Director General of the Center for Political Information, the fact that Trump is trying to motivate his current actions with the events of the Second World War speaks only about his ignorance. Donald Trump is a major businessman who, by the will of fate, was in the position of the President of the United States of America, and this speaks about everything. For obvious reasons, Trump tried to connect the historical event with factors it turned out awkwardly. Of course, in the future, Trump will remember this more than once, with a high probability this will become a popular joke among the opponents of the president. More than once such a strange and thoughtless utterance came back to him. US officials said that the most serious measures could be taken against Turkey, and not only sanctions. Which, for example, to try from the United States, we hear very conflicting statements, including from Trump himself. He threatens with sanctions, then generally expel, or at least suspend membership, Turkey from NATO, and then he generally says that this is not their war, and all negotiations with Turkey will take place during Erdogan's scheduled visit to Washington in November. In this case, it generally turns out that until mid-November, Turkey's hands are completely untied. How could the Americans hit Turkey? They have a very large arsenal. First, they could still lower the speed of interaction within NATO. Secondly, the United States has leverage over the Turkish economy, which is in crisis. These are sanctions and classic instruments of economic warfare. However, at the moment we do not see a clear desire to punish Turkey. And I am not sure that it exists at all. Alexei Mukin, what are the serious measures? I myself am interested in hearing what America can do so as not to inflict more damage on itself. In addition to sanctions, the United States of America cannot threaten Turkey. If Trump begins, as he threatened, to provoke a collapse of the Turkish economy, this will entail a domino effect. Economically significant countries will refuse to cooperate with the United States. The dollar will become a toxic currency. If Trump still intends to make America great again, then, in my opinion, he has entered the wrong track. Denying any manifestations of sovereignty not only to his opponents, but also to his partners, Trump does not even shoot himself in the leg, but in the temple. Will the United States of America intervene in the situation or continue to actually remain inactive? The triad, if Turkey confines itself to the stated goals, that is, the creation of a buffer zone and there will be no advance of forces controlled by Ankara deep into the Kurdish territories, then the Americans will pretend that everything is fine. Of course, a separate conversation in Washington with Erdogan will take place, but after it the parties come out embracing, saying that all the contradictions have been resolved and Turkey remains an important ally in NATO and an important trade partner of the United States. Alexei Mukin, if we recall the events of 70 years ago, it is worth mentioning the phrase of Comrade Stalin, each betrayal has a name, surname and patronymic. And in this case, we are dealing with Donald Trump. The United States of America has really betrayed the Kurds. They most likely do not realize any of the threats against Turkey. This is likely to provoke skepticism about themselves. Do I need to deal with the USA? Is it possible to deal with the USA? And in general, does cooperation with America make any sense? Many of their partners will be asking these questions. Instead of making America great, Trump is digging it in the foreign policy direction.